All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. I'm Taylor Dahl, and I'm joined today by Ben Devine. You've probably seen him on Twitter at Chicago_NFL. So, Ben, I appreciate your time. I know we're coming off a pretty fun win, and hoping that continues.
Yeah. Hey, looking forward to more of this. Let's keep it going.
I know. So let's start with that a little bit. This is a preview for the next game, but I do want to talk about maybe some of the things that went right and wrong in the last game and expectations. The biggest thing is the run game. The run game got going. DeAndre Swift had his best game as a Chicago Bear. And so what are your thoughts on that? Was it a fluke? Do you feel like they figured out a way to get this ball on the ground working a little bit more? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I know that they put a lot of time into that running game, and I know that is very key in the offense. Of course, that's been something that, we've been looking forward to for a bit now. But I will say that it's a good sign. It's a good sign they've been working on that. It's a good sign, not only the offensive line, I think, gelling a little bit more. I will say that I saw on a couple occasions, it seemed like the Commanders were almost daring the Bears to run. I don't know if you saw early in that game that first fourth down conversion the Bears were trying to go for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Bears kind of expected Washington to line up, put a heavy front, but they were in a very light nickel package, and they kind of were expecting the Bears to throw on that one. And I think throughout the game, I think the Bears took advantage of that. That's a good thing, and I think the Bears, have done a great job doing that. But you hope that it does continue, because that's going to be key to keeping Caleb Williams upright.
Yeah.
And that's going to be his best friend.
Yeah, and that's what we've had that conversation. It's also just been kind of that little extra seasoning of Ben Johnson's offense when you have that run game going, and it takes pressure off the quarterback. That's one thing that we always talk about in the NFL as a whole. The offensive line, that's another part of it. They looked good. He still got sacked 3 times, but they looked a lot better in a lot of situations. Obviously, the run game being a part of that. But Theo Benedette getting his first start at left tackle. Darnell Wright looked really good. Some of the things he was doing, taking on double blocks, especially down the stretch, that final drive, he was a big piece of that being successful. So what are your thoughts on the line? Do you see this Theo Benedette and Darnell Wright as the bookends continuing?
Yeah, I mean, at least for the season, what was really big was you didn't see you didn't see a lot of just wide open pressures from the tackles, and especially on Darnell Wright's end, no major penalties. Now, you had that one on Theo Benedette, which was a big play, overturned a touchdown. That was a little suspect, I think. But other than that, I think, that's kind of what you're looking for. And that's going to really solidify the line, because the interior played very well as well.
Yeah, we saw Jonah Jackson wind up on the injury report that they released yesterday, hoping that's not the case, because I do feel like Jonah's gotten better game by game this season. And you use that word gel. It's such an important word with offensive linemen. As their time together, the more in sync they'll get. So you want to try and get those starting 5 out there and keep them healthy. So we'll see how that looks. But when it comes to some of the other things, we're seeing some criticism on Twitter when it comes to not using DJ Moore enough. And why does Zacchaeus have more targets than DJ Moore? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's just Ben keeping his creativeness and unpredictableness? Is it DJ? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because this goes back beyond Ben Johnson. I mean, last year, DJ Moore, I think his numbers were down quite a bit, playing with Caleb Williams. So I think this precedes a little bit of what Ben Johnson's done. But it was a little bit telling when you go out and you sign some wide receivers in free agency, although not, A+ to your wide receivers. But then you go out and you spend your top 2 draft picks on a tight end and a receiver. So it kind of shows there's a little bit of at least a changing of the guard to some degree. And there's got to be, a new coaching staff's going to put their own stamp on it. So I don't know. I think DJ Moore's he's a great pro, and he's a good player. I think the Bears are going to use him and need him, especially this season. But I think, you can kind of see just some of the fingerprints of, at some point, I don't know, with the high salaries of DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, when you have these high draft picks, of course you want to see them produce. And that's going to be key, especially the back half of this season, to see where they're at, especially with what their roster is going to be going forward here.
And we saw this coming into the season, it was talked about a lot how high of a number that Ben Johnson uses 12 personnel. This last game, it was very high 11 personnel. I want to say it was like 80 something percent is the stat I read that he was in 11 personnel this last week. We saw that Roma Dunze was blocking a ton. We saw DJ Moore making some blocks. They was using a lot of wide receivers out there and multiple different ones. We saw multiple ones get catches. Do you think this is, and this is just kind of a prediction because I think Ben Johnson's still trying to figure out this offense and see what really works for Caleb and the personnel he has now. But do you see that shifting a little bit, that 11 personnel working, or do you think that that's a game by game thing and it just worked against?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, we don't have a large sample size of Ben Johnson here. And, even looking back on the Lions offense, he said it's going to be completely different. He said it's going to be based on the personnel. And you probably saw a lot of that more because Colston Loveland was healthy. He's back with the team. And they do want to get him more involved. I know that that's going to be a lot going forward. And if you look at, his numbers compared to Komet's and even adding in Luther Burden to a degree, I think the rookies are going to be leaned into, and they need to show their talent here as the season progresses. And that'll be very key. But I think you should expect, if you got two healthy tight ends and two very important playmakers on your team, I think you're going to see a lot of those two tight end sets a bit moving forward.
So let's look at this weekend a little bit. A lot of storylines when it comes to this Bears-Saints game. The big one, Dennis Allen, obviously returning to his former team. That's one. Caleb Williams beat out Spencer Rattler in college. That's another storyline. So there's a lot that we can talk about. Everyone's posting the record against the Saints. I think they've lost like 7 straight against the Saints going back to 2011, I believe it was. So a lot of ties. And I think one thing we can say that has happened so far this season is some of the boxes are being checked that have been hovering over the Bears in a negative light. The road wins, that was part of it, back-to-back road wins now. That's something that you can be excited about. Those fourth quarter comeback when, it actually winning the games at the end with blocked field goals and made field goals rather than it being in reverse and the Bears losing that way. So there's a lot of things we're seeing kind of shake out that is different than what we've seen those last few years. And so you're hoping that continues. You're hoping that you can break the Saints streak right now. But for you, what is the X factor for the Bears? What does this game look like for the Bears to be able to, let's just start with the offensive side of the ball. Offensively, what do they have to do to beat the Saints?
The Saints, their struggles are primarily their defense has really struggled, giving up a lot of points and yards, but they've been pretty good against the run. I think that their number on the season's 3.5, less than 4 yards a carry. And so they're in the upper half of, kind of keeping teams down, which is surprising for a 1-5 team. You expect them to be run on a lot in games they're down, but they've done a good job against the run. So that's going to be really the key, how well the Bears can continue building on what they did last week and continue to run the ball. They've been susceptible to the pass. I think they've given up 14 passing touchdowns. So they're one of the league leaders there. So I expect, Caleb Williams to come out, have a good game. You hope that it's not one of those trap or letdown games, but I think there are just looking at the team and just looking how they're getting hungry for these wins. And this one's back at home. They're kind of in the midst of a 5-game stretch where 4 of them are on the road. This is kind of the middle home game. So you got to kind of circle this one. You got to kind of win this one. And so I don't expect there to be much of a letdown. You hope. I mean, as Bears fans, look at this is how we've been, kind of conditioned the last few years. Once we start having a little momentum or hope, the rug gets yanked out from under us. So it's scary to kind of be cautiously optimistic, but I think it's different. I think that the coaching staff's different. I think Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson, I think they nailed the hires here. And I think the culture is actually changing so that you're not going to have those big letdowns and hopefully never come close to those 10-game losing streaks that we've seen in the last couple of years. We've seen it a couple times.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about the assistant coaches, because on a podcast I did recently, we talked about that. Like everyone from Dan Rochar, Chris Morgan, I don't really know what was happening back there, but there was a lot of issues, and Eric Bieniemy, and it's taken a little bit, but you feel like they're making things happen. Al Harris, I think, was a huge hire. I love what he's been able to do with no Jalen Johnson and what Tyreek Stevenson has looked like to start this season. Has it been perfect? No, but you're kind of having to throw, we weren't expecting to have to start Nashawn Wright out there for the majority of the season. season. And then Kyler just coming back. I think last week showed the importance of that nickel corner in an a Dennis Allen defense. So I hope that continues too. But yeah, I think when you talk about those assistant coaches and what they've brought so far, it looks like he really has hit on those assistants. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, we talk about TJ Edwards being back. We talk about Kyler Gordon being back. Tyreek Stevenson's playing well. Both safeties, Brisker and Kevin Byard, have played really well so far this season. You want to see probably a little bit more pass rush, obviously, that's a big one, but defensive line in general. I think Javon Dexter's played decent, but outside of that, we haven't seen Grady Jarrett. Turner has some moments, but there's still some you're not getting that pass rush interior, and I feel like that's kind of showed a little bit. So what are your thoughts there when it comes to the Saints? Spencer Rattler, he has an arm. His arm is incredible, so you want to be able to kind of control that, but also you want to be able to keep them not being able to run all over you on the ground like we've seen against the Bears before this Washington game. So thoughts on that defensively? What is the biggest thing, the biggest focus?
Well, I mean, the Bears have been excellent at taking the ball away, and that's really created a lot of these last 3 wins. I mean, that's been very big. Spencer Rattler only has 1 interception on the season, and I was a little shocked at that. So it's going to come down to who's going to take care of the ball here, and the Bears have done a great job turning the ball over. And that's really been their MO here. And Dennis Allen, I think, to both sides, I think when you put a brand new offense, brand new defense, I think the first quarter of the season usually is a big adjustment. And hopefully we're going to start seeing even some better play down the stretch. I think that's what Ben Johnson's been preaching since the beginning. And I think especially on defense, I think it's taken a little bit of time, but you do hope some of the higher priced, higher paid players on the defensive line really begin to step up. I think we've seen, linebackers and secondary guys that are doing quite well. And you mentioned Tyreek Stevenson, quite a switch from last year. And that's obviously a big testament to him, but also the coaches. But you really hope that some of the defensive linemen step up. You hope Grady Jarrett gets back to playing and then also playing well, because they've been doing a couple things with the defensive line, even rotating some of their players around, Shamar Turner as well. But I expect that the defensive line, those that are being highly paid, to take a step forward here in the next couple of games. Yeah.
So before I let you go, the final one, Caleb Williams, we can't leave without talking about Caleb. Your evaluation of him through the beginning of this season, because there's been some ups and downs. I think that was kind of expected. We've talked about Ben Johnson's his playbook and his scheme being one of the more difficult ones, and he's going to be learning a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of motion, a lot of things happening in this playbook. How do you think Caleb Williams has grasped this in the beginning of the season?
Yeah, so here's where we can look positively. At least I do. I look positively at the sacks. He has definitely improved in taking sacks, limiting them. There was one he took, just running on the sidelines, right before half in this last game. But I think it actually helped that he kind of slid, took some time off, forced Washington to take a timeout. So that one actually ended up being, a good sack, as rare as it can be. But if you look at just how he has limited that, I think that's a big plus. If I could have come into the year and said, what's one thing he could fix, I would have said that.
Yeah.
And it's not that he's totally fixed on that. Sometimes he still wants to extend. But his accuracy, if he can clean up some of the accuracy issues, if you want to look at it, he does have a lot of room to grow. And in Ben Johnson's offense, you can tell everybody who watches the game, you can see he's leaving a lot of meat on the bone offensively. I mean, there are chunk plays, there are big plays that he is missing, but I think that grows as we get further, even in this year. And I still don't think you're going to see the best version of Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson until at least year 2 or even into year 3. So we're just early into this process. And with quarterbacks, it is a process. It is a long process. And sometimes we get a little too impatient just because we don't know what it's like here in Chicago to have a quarterback, to actually groom and grow someone into the kind of Pro Bowl player that we want to have. But I think second half of this year, especially by the time we start getting to November and December, you'll hope things are still improving and on the upswing.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about a little bit on Making Monsters before about people forget because you have just this like, okay, what's happening now is what's been happening. But you go back to the beginning of even Ben Johnson with Jared Goff, and it took a bit. They started 1-6 that season. It was slow for Jared Goff to really totally grasp that offense. And Jared Goff was in year 6 or 7 of his career by then. Caleb Williams is 3 games into his career. So I do think sometimes we get a little antsy because we want the quarterback, and you're like, okay, it's supposed to just magically happen and everything works when you have the right quarterback. But I do think it's a building process. And right now you're winning these games. And I keep saying, honestly, you're probably phantom holding call on Darnell Wright against the Vikings of being a 4-1 football team right now. So it's a little crazy. But then in reverse, you can also say you're a blocked field goal and a missed field goal away from having the opposite record you have right now. So, but everybody, that's what the NFL is right now. The one-score games are what it is. So if you can start having that coaching staff and the personnel to win those one-score games, then you're doing it right, because that's what the good teams are doing right now. So we will see how the rest of the season shakes out. But I think there's a lot of positives to take out early from coaching staff, from Caleb Williams, from a lot of the guys that are on the team now.
Absolutely.
All right, Ben. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Hopefully we're celebrating another win next week. That'll be really fun to go up and be a 4-2 team.
All right. Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Taylor. Anytime.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.
All right, let's continue on this Bears versus Saints preview. I have my friend Ross Jackson over there. You guys know him. You'll find him. He covers the Saints for Locked On Saints. We chatted early in this season, Ross, about when the Bears hired Dennis Allen and kind of expectations of that. I just want to give you some kudos because you pretty much nailed it of what we've seen from Dennis Allen so far. And I mean that in good ways. I think a lot of people are really happy with what DA's done, especially with no Jalen Johnson. Kyler's just now coming back. So you're missing your top two corners, your top linebacker. There's a lot of missing pieces, and he's been able to figure things out and win some football games and get a lot of turnovers and do things like that on the defensive side of the ball that has really helped. But I remember one thing that always kind of stuck out to me from the beginning when we chatted about Dennis, and you said people may get a little frustrated because he's a little bend don't break in the beginning of games or in the beginning of drives, and then you will see more aggressiveness as things, as the game goes on or as the season goes on. And we've seen that already. There are a lot of people are like, wait, why isn't he blitzing? We heard like he blitzes a ton, and I was like, let's all be patient and let's see. And then this last week he blitzed a lot, and we saw that, and it kind of opened up some things for the Bears defense. And so we'll get to that a little bit, but I do want to chat with the Saints side of the ball. And we'll start with Kellen Moore. The new head coaches are going to be the biggest conversations around the NFL and what that looks like. There was a lot of new ones this offseason. Who made the right choices? Who made the wrong choices? We won't know that for a few years, but you can determine in this short period of time what the feelings are. So for Kellen Moore, what's the vibe around Kellen so far and what he's done in New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, he's built a really incredible. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. But he's also built, this really incredible players first mentality. He's become the players coach for New Orleans, which I think is something that's necessary right now. When you're going through a rebuild like the Saints are, even though they don't want to say it out loud, they are. You need that kind of personnel glue that keeps the locker room together while you're going through some hard times. Like, I expect that you'll see some players potentially traded from the Saints ahead of the trade deadline and things like that. When those types of things happen, you need to have a really strong unit and a really strong locker room. And I think he's done a very good job of creating an environment where that can be fostered. And then in the play side of things, I think that he's brought an innovative offense here to New Orleans. They haven't really fully implemented all of it yet. They're kind of going slowly in terms of getting those things implemented, but I think eventually you'll see a ramp up there. He's already shown a propensity to go out there and get the talent that he knows that he wants for this team. I don't think that this team is totally in Kellen Moore's vision just yet. I would say the same thing on the defensive side when it comes to Brandon Staley, who's their new defensive coordinator and defensive play caller. And so I think some of those other things are still taking shape, but you can be patient and let things take shape when you've created the foundation that a guy like Kellen Moore has created so far here in New Orleans.
Yeah, the Bears know something about rebuilds, a thing or two about having to rebuild. It's been a long process of a rebuild. I think this is the first time, and it's a short glimpse. We don't know yet, but in this short glimpse, it does feel like this is the first time where it feels like it's going in the right direction. And so there's some positivity there. But then there's also this thing holding Bears fans back of, I've been burned before. Is this another trick like Nagy had in 2018 where you win the NFC North and then everything crumbles after? So we know about the rebuilds, but let's talk about the evaluation of Spencer Rattler so far. I think that there's some good things. There's some obviously things to be worked on. You could say that about any of these young quarterbacks that we're talking about from the 2024 class, especially. There's a lot of them playing right now. But it's funny too. I saw a stat that there was like 6 quarterbacks that played at Oklahoma all playing this last weekend, which is insane. Because it's like Kyler, Baker, Caleb, Spencer. There's 2, I can't think of them all, but I was like, that's kind of wild. Oklahoma's pushing out those quarterbacks. But the evaluation of him, because we know he has an arm. His arm's incredible. I remember seeing it obviously at Oklahoma. And then once he transferred you saw it at South Carolina. You want to reel all of that in and those deep explosive plays being a part of it with some other things. But what are you guys seeing from Spencer so far?
Yeah, I think we've seen a less explosive Spencer Rattler, but I don't think that has to do with Spencer Rattler. I think that has to do with a couple of different things. Number one is, like I mentioned, you're still building that Kellen Moore offense, and that Kellen Moore offense likes layups and three-pointers. Probably sounds familiar in terms of the way that Ben Johnson does his offense too, but it's a lot of like first read, and if it's not there, check it down. But if that first read is there, there's an opportunity for an explosive play. And so the Saints are kind of finding more of that. We saw the 87-yard touchdown to Rashid Shaheed 2 weeks ago, the 53-yard completion downfield to wide receiver Chris Olave last week that opened the game. They went into the game knowing that that's the shot that they wanted, executed it well against an unscouted look when New England sent that corner blitz and then got Chris Olave one-on-one with a safety. You're going to take that 10 times out of 10, right? And so I think you're seeing those start to finally creep in and creep up. For the first 4 weeks, Spencer Rattler's yards per attempt were 30th in the NFL out of qualifying quarterbacks. And then over the course of the past 2 weeks, he's 10th amongst qualifying quarterbacks. It's amazing what the one explosive play will do for you in each of those games, right? And so, you always kind of look at those types of metrics, understanding you're one play away, good or bad, from things shifting in a different direction. But I think that what we're seeing now is a Spencer Rattler that's getting a little bit more comfortable. In terms of his overall valuation, what I would say is that he's a quarterback that has proven that you can win with him. Now he's on the sort of trajectory of trying to prove that you can win because of him. And I think that that's kind of the next thing that the Saints are trying to define there. I think that it's time to maybe be a little bit more aggressive, take the top off a little bit more of those opposing defenses, and really start to get a little bit more risky. It's okay to throw interceptions. Spencer Rattler's only thrown 1 so far this season. Go out and take those risks, play with a little bit more of a high variance, and then see what that offense can get going.
There's a few storylines, obviously, the Dennis Allen against his former team storyline. Caleb Williams, beat out Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma. That's another storyline. You have the Bears haven't beat the Saints in their last 7 meetings. So that's another storyline. There's a lot that are kind of meshing into this. And I think that was Rochar there. Dan Rochar, was he in New Orleans? Okay. So Rochar was there. There's a lot of like connections between these two teams. There's this weird feeder program, whether it's one way or the other. But I think that makes it fun. It adds extra things into a game that maybe otherwise people were kind of like, okay, it's a Bears team that we really don't know what they are. It's a Saints team that, there's some good and there's some bad, but people kind of see that division as the Bucs division, maybe the Falcons after they beat the Bills. But let's talk a little bit about the run game, because that's been one of the things that has been such a focus in Chicago. Mainly this first few weeks was because they couldn't run the ball and they couldn't stop the run. And then this last week, they were able to actually finally DeAndre Swift get the ball going on the ground, and they were able to stop the Commanders from really virtually doing anything in their ground game after they call him Bill, whatever we want to call that running back, Bill, the running back. And so I do think was that a fluke? Is that something that we're looking for the future for the Bears? But when it comes to Saints, Kamara, I mean, he's one of the guys that still people are going to talk about. He has games where it's absolutely, you can't stop Alvin Kamara. And then there's games where maybe you're not talking about him so much. This year, he has a 99-yard game, a 70-yard game, but just a touchdown on the season. Talk a little bit about that run game.
Yeah, I think this is another one of the big storylines too, by the way. And not only Alvin Kamara, but also his running mate in the backfield, Kendre Miller. There was some, I'll call it bad blood, I think, between Kendre Miller and Dennis Allen.
Okay.
Dennis Allen never really seemed pleased around or about Kendre Miller. There was this weird IR thing that happened as well that caused some confusion. But I think that that's another guy that's going to be contributing a lot to the run game and will have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder going up against Dennis Allen's defense directly. So I'd watch for both of these guys. I think the Saints have to get the run game going in this one. The Bears so far throughout the season allowing 5.7 yards per carry, 31st in the NFL. But like you mentioned, showed real good promise coming out of the bye last week up against the Washington Commanders. A lot of different adjustments happening going into that game that I think we'll probably see carry through here in this game against the Saints. And so I think this run game is a big part of what's got to get going. For New Orleans. That's when they've been at their most successful. That's, they won their game up against the I think at the time they were the 29th ranked run defense with the New York Giants. They won not won, but they competed in a way that we didn't expect up against the Buffalo Bills, who at the time had one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, 30 or 31. And so that's got to be a big part of, or maybe even you might say the cornerstone or the hallmark of the Saints attack this weekend. So I would absolutely expect them to be leaning on the running backs out of the backfield, right? They like to use the short passing game as a bit of an extension of their run game as well. So sometimes those quick screens and things like that, they kind of factor that into their run game, even though it doesn't show up on the stat sheet that way. But look for them to be pretty aggressive in the red zone with the run game, as well as early downs with the run game, because they're trying to get to those mixed down opportunities on third down. That's a big part of the Kellen Moore approach.
And meshing that with the offensive line, they drafted a guy, Kelvin Banks. I was honestly pretty high on Kelvin Banks this offseason. And I know a lot of people were questioning, can he play tackle in the NFL? Is he going to be a guard in the NFL? That was one of the bigger questions with him. And then the Saints used another pick for Fuaga last year, who obviously he was drafted. So they've invested into that line and then some more veteran pieces too. But how has the offensive line performed to start the season?
Yeah, 4 first-round picks on that offensive line and 1 second-round pick that should have been a first-round pick in center Eric McCoy, but ended up slipping in that draft. They've invested big time in that offensive line. And, oh, by the way, their next depth piece, Dylan Radins, was also a second-round pick. And so they've invested quite a bit in this offensive line. And so you want to see probably better than what you've seen out of them so far. Just being completely honest, we've seen a lot of pressure on Spencer Rattler so far early this season, but they've only had 2 games so far to where they've actually started their full 5, right? Their full starting 5. And against against Buffalo, you only got 1 half before Cesar Ruiz, the starting right guard, went down. So last week was really the first week, and it did look better. It did look more promising during that time. Trevor Penning is moving over from left tackle. He played at right tackle last year, and now he's over at left guard. And he gave up 2 sacks the first time that he was out there when he got his first start just a couple of weeks ago. And then since then hasn't given any up. So you probably want to see things get going a little bit more for that unit for sure, but they seem to be trending in the right direction. And obviously the talent is there in terms of those investments.
Yeah, the gel word is important for the offensive line. And I think, honestly, sometimes it's underrated how it takes a little bit of time for those guys to really start to mesh. Yep. And that's, I mean, we've seen it in Chicago too. The 4 of the 5 linemen right now are different starters from last year. So it's a lot of newness in front of Caleb Williams. A good way. It's good. I'm glad it's Joe Thuney and Drew Dahlman in front of Caleb Williams compared to what they had last year.
Great, but
it takes some time. And you're seeing that start in the beginning. Everyone's like, oh no, we invested all this money and picks into a line and they look the same. And then now last week, people are like, oh, okay, maybe not. Maybe this is starting to adjust a little bit. They did have to make a left tackle change. He benched Braxton Jones, put in Theo Benedette, and that looks like a positive changes. Now we'll see. But the offensive line, it's important. These guys need time together to really be able to get that, just start to really click, and the anchor, your center, being that guy that kind of pulls everything together. I think you just need some time. Let's switch over defensively for a minute. So you have recognizable names on there. Cam Jordan, everybody knows who Cam Jordan is. We know that. Carl Granderson, another name, Justin Reed, Kool-Aid. We know these names, but I don't know how much we talked about the Saints defense this year, honestly, so far coming from the Chicago or even maybe nationally in general. So talk a little bit about what's going on. What's the bread and butter of that defense right now with Brandon Staley?
Yeah, it's another bend don't break defense, and the unfortunate
at least you guys are
part,
used to it.
right. The unfortunate part for Brandon Staley, new defensive coordinator, new defensive play caller, is that I don't think that he really has the personnel that he needs for the system that he likes to run. He runs this 3-4 system that uses these stand-up edge rushers, But typically when you have those stand-up edge rushers, you don't want both of them to be pure edge rushers. You want one of them to be able to be an edge defender that can also get in the coverage, right? Drop in the flats, things like that. And so I expect that to be a big investment over the course of this offseason because the Saints don't really have that player. They're trying to get guys like Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan and now Chase Young, who made his return last week, to be those players. But that's not their skill set. That's not in their wheelhouse, right? Like those are pass rushers. Those are guys you want going after the quarterback, not dropping back into coverage. And so I think there's still a lot of tweaking to be done. I expect that defense to look very different personnel-wise going into next year in 2026. And so we'll see where things go. But the hallmarks of what you're going to see against Brandon Staley is going to be a lot of space given up by the corners. You're going to see a lot of zone coverage. They want to keep their eyes back on the quarterback so they can go out there and try to make some plays, know where the quarterback wants to go with the ball, know if the quarterback's trying to escape to be able to go and try to make a play on that. And then you're going to see those stand-up edge rushers and a lot of shifting between 2 and 1 linebacker on the field, which leaves a little bit of conversation in terms of what's going to be available over the middle of the field. And so those are the big things that I think you're going to be watching for as a Bears fan to see where things might be able to be available for Caleb Williams in the passing game. As far as the run game goes, the Saints have been trending in the right direction there. Guys like Devon Godshaw as well as Jonathan Bullard have been big for them. Jonathan Bullard, of course, somebody the Bears just cannot escape in their time. But those guys have been really beneficial for New Orleans, and another defensive tackle that's kind of moved over to like a 3-4 defensive end. And Brian Brzee, he's taken some steps ahead in the run game too. So those are some of the names that I think might stand out, but that's kind of the idea of where this defense is right now. It's where things are still kind of coming together for them.
I remember another thing talking to you when we talked in the beginning of the year, and you mentioned that Dennis Allen really wanted Jaquan Brisker. Jaquan Brisker ended up going a pick ahead. The Saints ended up getting Alontae Taylor. What's the feel around Alontae Taylor? It's kind of funny because recently Bears fans are kind of like, all right, we don't know when Jalen's coming back. Do you think the Saints would trade Alontae Taylor? So 2-part question. What do you think of Alontae Taylor? Is that one of the names you're saying may be in the mix for a change of scenery?
Yeah, I think he could be. I don't think that there's a lot of untouchables. I think maybe Eric McCoy and the 2025 draft class are kind of the untouchables. Outside of those that are like, you have some contractual limitations on some players that you just re-signed and stuff like that. Like that obviously is out there. But when it comes down to Alontae's in a contract year, he's had conversations and they have kept lines of communication open when it comes to a contract extension here in New Orleans, but that doesn't mean that the contract extension is going to happen, right? And so there's a chance that he ends up like guys like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Carl Granderson. Like a lot of these players are going to be in conversation over the course of the next couple of weeks with that November 4th trade deadline on the way. And so I expect that there will be teams that are going to be interested in Alontae Taylor. I think the thing that's important to know is that the Saints might be picking up the phone when it rings, but they're not calling other teams, right? Okay. Like they're not trying to shop these guys. It's just if the right opportunity shows up and what you gain in terms of your ability to add in the future, if that matches or it exceeds that which you might lose for the present, you're typically going to take those deals. So it would be that kind of a thing. I think Alontae is still, it's not that I think Alontae is still figuring things out. I think Brandon Staley is still figuring things out with Alontae. Yeah. And I think the return of Chase Young makes things a little bit easier because Chase Young is the type of player that the Saints don't have on defense otherwise, that other offenses have to worry about. They have to game plan for Chase Young. And so maybe that opens up more opportunities for Alontae Taylor. Alontae did his, had his patented, nickel rush sack in week 1. And then we haven't really seen it since then. So I'm looking to see if maybe they start to try to deploy him a little bit more as they face more mobile quarterbacks here throughout the rest of the season, like Caleb Williams.
Is that where he, like nickel corner wise, is that where he is all of the time? Is that where you think his strength is? Okay.
That's where his strength is. I think that and when I say his strength, I mean, it's because he can do all the things, right? He can defend the run, he can tackle, he can rush the passer, he can cover, so it just kind of takes advantage of everything that he can do. However, I think on the other side of this, he does also in base packages. So when the Saints go out there with, a full only 4 defensive backs, he will play outside and then he'll move inside, probably with rookie Quincy Riley on the outside opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry when they go into their nickel sets.
Okay. Yeah. And that's why I was interested, because the Bears, obviously, they don't know the timeline for Jalen Johnson right now. Tyreek Stevenson's been playing well. He took a big leap from last year. But the outside corner opposite him is Nishawn Wright's been playing. It's been quite a bit of a struggle. Kyler Gordon just coming back, but Kyler is the nickel corner. That's what he does. He's a very, very good nickel corner. And some people are like, well, maybe throw him outside because you need another outside. And it's it's hard for me to take away the nickel corner in a Dennis Allen defense, because it is so important in what he does in a lot of things on the field, and move him away from that. So Alante, I wonder, I don't know if that's a Bears. I don't know what they're thinking, if they even want to add anybody, but I just saw that name kind of popping up. But let's two more for you before I let you go. The Brandon Staley, what to you is the biggest difference between him and what Dennis Allen did there in New Orleans?
I think a lot of it comes down to the front and how they play up front. Dennis Allen is a little bit more 4-3 or, base 4-3 type of looks, leans in a lot on those kind of bigger body defensive ends. At least that's what he did here in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And then you have Brandon Staley, who plays a little bit more of a 3-4 front, to where you have 5 on the defensive line and then a couple of off-ball linebackers that are back there to cover, and DeMario Davis as well as Pete Werner. And then they try to put a lot of pressure around the edge. The majority of without a doubt, the majority of the pressure that the Saints have generated this season have come from the edge or have come from the slot. And so that, I think, is kind of a trademark or hallmark, if you will, of what it is that Brandon Staley likes to do. And it's very, very different than what Dennis Allen likes to do. And then also here in New Orleans, Dennis Allen played a lot more physical press man type coverages. Here in New Orleans now, under Brandon Staley, you're seeing a little bit more playing with space, playing with off coverage, and keeping the eyes back on the quarterback.
Yeah, Dennis Allen's definitely a very physical, he likes that physicality and everything. You're seeing it in, I mentioned the takeaways at the top, but you talk about not having either of your starting corners for the first few weeks of the season, and you still are stacking up takeaways. And that's a combination between punching the ball out and getting up and getting that taken away. And I remember that being something you mentioned at the top too. But so final one, from the perspective of the Saints, what is the talk about the Bears? Is it a sense of, that you don't really know what this team is? Is it they're on the rise? Is it they still have a lot to figure out? Because there's a lot of question marks still that even Bears fans figure, but we do feel like you're heading in the right direction. What is the sense on that side?
Yeah, I think that's, I think a lot of it is looking at the Bears and saying, wow, that's almost an aspirational situation for where the Saints could potentially be in a year or two, right? Like a team that's on the right path trajectory wise. There's a lot of promise, I feel like, coming out of Chicago. Looking at that team and looking at the matchup, they're the better team on paper, Chicago is, to the Saints, to New Orleans. I think the trio of wide receivers there, and Rome Odunze, as well as, of course, Luther Burden and DJ Moore, who I know is managing injury, but that's a really, really good set of skill position players, all the way down to tight end and running back as well. And then just knowing what it is that a guy like Dennis Allen can do in terms of changing his approach. I mean, going from 50% of the defense being played with a single high safety to 70% last week up against the Washington Commanders, and basically saying, I dare you to run, or go ahead and throw if you want to, but committing to stopping the run. And then leaping from being the 25th team in blitz percentage over the first 4 weeks to the number 4 team in blitz percentage in last week. I expect that you're going to see a lot of exactly those things going up against a young quarterback like Spencer Rattler. And so I think that's a really, really good team over there. It's headed in the right direction, kind of reminiscent of, a division mate of the Detroit Lions, who went on that kind of slow upward trajectory. I think that that's kind of the way that the Bears are perceived, at least from here in New Orleans.
It's funny you say that about the Dennis Allen and how different it looks from week to week, because it's kind of similar with Ben Johnson. We talked about this a lot. Yeah. He ran a lot of 12 personnel last year with Detroit. And in the beginning, the first few weeks, he did a lot of 12 personnel. Last week, he ran 86%, 11 personnel. And so all of a sudden he was like, let's switch it. Let's figure, this isn't working as well as I want it to, or Washington, here's some of the weaknesses we can take advantage of. And that's the fun thing, because the Bears haven't felt like they've had coaches who adjust mid-game, mid-season, whatever the case may be. It's just kind of here's what we have, here's the product, and let's see what we have. And these two coaches have proved otherwise. But I appreciate your time as usual, Ross. I'm sure we'll chat again. We'll have some other reason to chat eventually, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.